of you who are going to be doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana, technicians or engineers? How many of you are willing to work in the Foreign Service and spend your lives traveling around the world? On your willingness to do that, not merely to serve 1 year or 2 years in the service, but on your willingness to contribute part of your life to this country, I think will depend the answer whether a free society can compete. I think it can, and I think Americans are willing to contribute, but the effort must be far greater than we've ever made in the past. So I come here tonight to go to bed, but I also come here tonight to ask you to join in the effort.
Earlier this year, a group of women who answered this original call to service by then Senator Kennedy came together to share their stories about the impact the Peace Corps had on their lives. As you might imagine, the conversation was lively, rewarding, and served as a reminder of the power of service. They were among the first women of the Peace Corps who are as committed today as they were then to creating a better world for future generations. These are those women today. But who were they then? In the early morning hours of October 14, 1960, when presidential candidate Kennedy challenged and inspired the University of Michigan students, the world was poised for change. But the changes would prove to be beyond most imaginations, rocking long-held ideas about the roles of youth and women in society.
When I joined the Peace Corps, I was a Catholic school girl from Jersey City, New Jersey, who worked for a year at AT&T, of all places. So fairly, kind of contained environment. So, of course, the Peace Corps basically opened up the world to me, both literally and figuratively. But if I try to, sort of distill out of it, what did it do for me personally, I would say that one thing it taught me to do was to always, not to be intimidated by work that seemed beyond my ability. That we were often cast into doing things that nobody our age would ever have been given that opportunity or responsibility. So I kind of learned that you can go for something that seems more difficult, more challenging, and so I learned how to stretch and not to be intimidated by that.
But here we come out of the 50s, it's kind of a stable, blah sort of period, and suddenly there's a presidential debate, and here's this glorious, young, charming man with soaring rhetoric and so forth running for the presidency. And then somewhere along the campaign trail, March 1st, I think it was, in Michigan, he says, well, I'm thinking about starting a program to let young people go abroad and represent the nation and work in in other countries, let's say. I mean, this was an amazing thing to hear. I remember, saying, I'm signing up right now. I mean, he hadn't even won the election. And I think that was the riveting thing for so many of the people, at least that I knew, that wanted to go in. There was just no question you wouldn't do this. It was an opening, an opportunity, a way to represent your country. It was something new. It was adventure. It was risk. It was all of these wonderful things that got the blood flowing.
Dick and I joined the Peace Corps in response to Kennedy's first speech in '61, and we moved to Washington with our family, 5 children, ages 6 to 12. And we were supposed to go to Pakistan, but we didn't because our eldest had osteomyelitis and was recovering. So we waited and were sent to Tunisia.
It didn't matter if you came from, Esparto, California, off the farm in Michigan or the Upper West Side. Everybody was the same. And I think the The big lesson that I learned early on was that people, however poor, however illiterate, however undereducated, are have as much worth, have as many solutions, have as much to say as anybody.
I have today signed an executive order providing for the establishment of a Peace Corps on a temporary pilot basis. I'm also sending to Congress a message proposing authorization of a permanent Peace Corps. This Corps will be a pool of trained men and women sent overseas by the United States government or through private institutions and organizations to help foreign countries meet their urgent needs for skilled manpower. It will not be easy. None of the men and women will be paid a salary. They will live at the same level as the citizens of the country which they're sent to, doing the same work, eating the same food, speaking the same language. We're going to put particular emphasis on those men and women who have skills in teaching, agriculture, and in health.
When President Kennedy signed the executive order officially creating the Peace Corps, some people doubted that women belonged there. But women signed up to change the world, to change themselves, and went everywhere Peace Corps assigned them, to Africa, the South Pacific, Asia, and Latin America. The possibilities seemed exciting, the opportunities endless.
You know, a couple of years ago when we were doing research for the 50th anniversary of Peace Corps, I was lucky enough to go to the archives and read Schreiber's letters. And these were the letters he wrote between January and June of 1961. Mm-hmm. And one of the surprises for me, because I didn't even have this in my head at the time, was the back and forth in his letters between him and the members of Congress about women as Peace Corps volunteers. And the congressional people were writing him saying, wait a minute, as you're thinking this through, women should not be Peace Corps volunteers, and we don't really even see women as staff. And reading Sarge Schreiber's letters, the power, the energy in those letters, back to the speakers and the committee chairs that are in charge of putting Peace Corps together, saying, yes, women are part of Peace Corps, and women will be part of that first group. It was more about, well, women don't do that.
Yeah.
So, we're just reminding you, Sarge, that women don't do this. And so Sarge was reminding them, yes, women do. So it's not we don't like or dislike women, it's just they don't belong in this activity. Yeah. This isn't what women do.
As women volunteered and left for overseas assignments, the women's movement was growing in the United States. Women confronted the restricted roles that gender placed on them, both at home and in other countries. Although women were in the first group of recruits, some in the Peace Corps were reluctant to include them as leaders, but others became their champions.
Gretchen Hanwerker appointed me to be talent search director. And I came in, got to my desk, and Debbie Harding came marching down the hall with a pile of resumes, all women. And she said, this is what we want to do. Put them down. And I began going through them. And you have to learn how to read women's resumes. I mean, I remember Gretchen said, she was asked by some journalist how she got to be an administrator. And she said, I had a husband, a house, and 3 children.
I went in there as a staff assistant. And credit to Charlie Peters, a year later, more to him than to me, he promoted me to become an evaluator, which was quite something because there had been the only female evaluator there had been was Betty Forsling Harris, who did not work in the office, but did a courtesy evaluation with one of the regular evaluators, I think, on her own. So this was a big thing. And the guys, who were all these tough journalists, were not keen on this girl, which I was, right, becoming an evaluator. But Charlie Peters was a great man, and he stood up for the idea, and I was the first, and then there were several others while I was there.
There were a lot of positions that were not open to women, and when I became head of placement in '74, I would say probably more than 50% of the country requests from the Peace Corps country offices had restrictions on women serving in Peace Corps jobs. And we were able to change that, making that almost impossible for countries to do that.
I wanted an international experience, and the thought of living in a small village, as described by Margaret Mead, was thrilling.
You know, I think about when I went overseas as a Peace Corps volunteer. I had no idea what I was doing. I had never been on an airplane. And I arrived in Tunisia and quickly discovered that they didn't know what to do with me as a woman. I was in an Arab society, relatively conservative Muslim culture, where all the women were veiled. I did not need to be veiled, and recognized that I became like a third sex. So I would strut in and I would actually sit and have tea with the men. And then I would be in the kitchen speaking colloquial Arabic with the women and helping them stir and do all of that. And each would let me in and let me defy all the rules. But in the process of getting from the beginning to that point, what I realized is I had to let go of whoever I was. And so at that moment, the great gift of what I learned was who I was and who I could be. And how do I find whatever this inner core is that can guide me and give me the confidence as I go forward.
I was interviewed by Mel Nigerian, who at the time I think was Blackford's, I want to say chief of staff, was probably more executive officer. And he interviewed me, and we had a good interview, I thought. And he told me at the time, from working in the Africa region, I had a nice big afro, which was very popular in the Africa region. He said down in the director's office, I could not have the afro or wear pants. So I decided I would get rid of the afro. So then I was able to wear my pants.
The decade of the 60s was a time of global uncertainty. Democracy and communism faced off in faraway corners of the world. Africa was shaking off the harness of colonialism. President Kennedy had been assassinated. And America's involvement in Vietnam was escalating, while the civil rights of minorities were being fought for in the streets and hallways of international governments. More than ever, engaging the world was a necessary part of the Peace Corps mission.
I mean, I like to think that I've made that all that effort over, 50 years of a professional life in areas that are directed toward trying to make the world a better place has had some impact.
One thing about Peace Corps, it's a place where people go to help. That's why they join, to help, and they do it. They help you, they'll help me, they help people where they're serving.
I was president in Africa when Africa transformed itself from colonialism to what was called independence in those days, not a political system, but independence, and then Eastern Europe, where that whole continent transformed itself into, more or less democracies, some strong, some not quite so strong.
As Peace Corps changed these women, they in turn changed the world. What they accomplished after Peace Corps service continued to transform, influence, and help others in need around the world and here at home in America.
Those elements, and they're within Peace Corps, they were elements of me finding myself, finding the confidence, finding leadership skills that I could use as I worked to give back. And part of what I'm appreciating is that my passion is about how do I help others have that kind of an experience, particularly women, so that they can find themselves in a much stronger way by having to lose who they think they are.
I've been very fortunate. That volunteer experience led me to Washington, where I tell people now, I spent a year calculating Peace Corps attrition
using an adding machine, which is, in this day and time, is a little hard to believe. I met my husband there. My children and my husband and I served in Nepal. I came back and I had the good fortune of working at the Foreign Service Institute, at the Corporation for National Service. I think what's been most satisfying, I've had lots of different jobs, worn a lot of different hats, but it has been working with young professionals.
I would say that my career choices, or job choices more likely than career, were all grew out of the values and orientation that you pick up in Peace Corps. And I had sort of a divided career between domestic work and international. I think one of the things that you come to when you do international work and is also, gee, we have a lot of issues here at home.
Well, one of the wonderful people I met along the way, 28 years ago, was a woman named Ellen Sirleaf, who became president of Liberia, the first woman leader in Africa. And when she was elected, she asked me to help her. And so I set up a little foundation for her, which is focused on rebuilding the education infrastructure that was destroyed during the 14 years of Civil War, with a heavy focus on girls' education. We've given over 10,000 scholarships to girls to go to school, primary through college, and thousands of women, market women, to take literacy courses, aside from building schools and libraries and so forth and so on.
Wherever you go in the world, well, in the country especially, if you say the word Peace Corps, you'll meet somebody who knows somebody who's been in the Peace Corps, want to know about the Peace Corps. It has just a magic ring to it. And whenever I talk to people, I give speeches. When I get a chance, I'll throw in the Peace Corps, because sometimes people don't, kids especially, don't know what they want to do. I said, consider the Peace Corps. And they all know about the Peace Corps. I said, what can I do? I said, there's so many things you can do, and you can help, and you can serve your time. And when you get back, you can go back to school if you want to. You can take the education you've learned and share it and do something else. It's just a good thing.
Imagine yourself in the early 1960s, at the beginning of a tumultuous decade where the times were changing. John Kennedy appears at the University of Michigan, challenging the best and the brightest of the next generation to defer their lives and careers, to go abroad, to open new opportunities, and to represent the United States to the developing world.
For me, it was a personal test. Could I manage to live in another cultural context and do a job?
Well, it taught me about people, number one. Trust, love, and care. To me, that's the model of Peace Corps, which I use for Peace Corps.
I think I also learned, I guess I lost any fear or suspicion of differences. And I guess today you would call that diversity, but at that time would just be people who are different from you. And so that's a great thing to have in life, where you know that all folks really are equal.
I think all these lessons that I learned in the Peace Corps and working in other countries were central to how I operated as a philanthropist, working in, for the Soros Foundations and so forth.
If there's any gift, and the gift that Peace Corps gave me, it's for women, and how do I play one small role in helping others find their voice. Younger women who then move on to the next generation with their own voice, their own leadership, their own identity, and their own pride in what they do.
I feel very blessed. I feel very blessed that it started with the Peace Corps, and is going to probably end with back in Africa.
That coaching and mentoring role, I really think that's been what I've been the best at and what I've enjoyed.
It really is the people you meet in the Peace Corps who affect you and allow you to affect the world. It is the people who make you appreciate the brotherhood, the sisterhood of people in the world, and just stick with that.
Join the Peace Corps. They say it's the toughest job you ever love. It's a job you will love.